Now let's do some examples where we use those postulates or theorems. For numbers 1 through 8, use the diagram and the given information to determine which lines are parallel. That's our goal. Which lines are parallel? State the reason. So that's the postulate or the theorem used to make that determination. Now you might need your hand or another piece of paper to cover up some of the picture because this is a very busy picture. So let's begin. Angle 9 is congruent to angle 16. Let's go find those angles and mark it in the picture. Angle 9, angle 16. There's those angles. Now I'm going to grab my piece of paper to cover up part of the picture that I don't need to see. How do I know I don't need to see the picture? Well, if I cover up that top line, notice I still can see angle 9 and I still can see angle 16. If I were to cover up this part of the picture, now I've covered up angle 16. Cover up the other part of the picture, you see what I mean. So we'll cover up that top part. Now let's try to identify what kind of angles we see. Well, here are the two lines right here. I may take my colored pencil or highlighter and trace the lines, this line and this line. These angles, 9 and 16, are not between the two lines, so they are exterior. Here's the transversal, 9 is on top, 16 is on the bottom, alternating sides of the transversal. So these are alternate exterior angles. So by the alternate exterior angles, if they're supposed to be congruent, I know I have to have parallel lines. So which are the lines that are parallel? This line and this line. Now I covered up what those lines are called, so let's move our paper and check out what those lines are. There they are, line M and L. M is parallel to L. So by the alternate exterior angles converse, I can say that M is parallel to L. Now to do each of these, you may want to grab your eraser and erase the marks that you made from the previous problem. Or just use a different color, like I'm about to do. Angle 8 is congruent to angle 11. Let's go find those angles. Here's angle 8, here's angle 11. Let's cover up the part of the picture that doesn't involve those angles. Not that part. Nope. Nope. There it is. I have to cover up line M and then I can still see my angles. So let's trace the two lines that are involved here. This line and this line. Now before we jump to any conclusions, let's identify what kind of angles these are. Angle 8 and angle 11, they are between the two lines, so they are interior, and they alternate right to left. One's on the right of the transversal, one's on the left. So 8 and 11 are alternate interior angles. Let's make that note. 8 and 11 are alternate interior. Now, alternate interior angles are supposed to be congruent. So this does tell us we have parallel lines. So according to the alternate interior angles converse, which are the lines that we traced over? This line, Q, and this line, N. So we can say Q is parallel to N. Do you want to try the next few and see how you did? Maybe pause the video and come back when you're done. So let's see what you did. Again, well, let's see first. I'm going to see if I need to do any erasing. Angles 5 and 7. Where's angle 5? Where's angle 7? Here's 5 and 7. So I don't really need to erase because I used a different color, but it might be helpful. I'm going to get rid of the marks I made before and just check out angle 5 and 7 without any distraction. So I'm going to cover up this part of the picture. I don't need to see that. Angle 5 and 7, those are corresponding angles. Let's make a note of that. We have corresponding angles. Corresponding angles are supposed to be congruent when the lines are parallel. That's according to the corresponding angles postulate. Therefore, if they tell me the angles are congruent, then I can say I have parallel lines. So according to the corresponding angles converse, I know that this line that's left in my picture, now remember I've covered up this part of the picture that I don't need to see, And this line must be the ones that are parallel, line M and line L. So line M parallel to line L. Let's check out the next one. I'll move my hiding paper out of the way and erase the marks that I made. Let's do number 4. Measure of angle 6 plus the measure of angle 7 equals 180 degrees. Here's angle 6, here's angle 7. Let's look at what kind of angles these are. Notice I put different angle marks because they're not congruent. They add up to 180 instead. Let's take our piece of paper and cover up the part of the picture that we don't need to see. These two angles are in between these two lines, therefore they're interior. But this time they're on the same side of the transversal, so they are consecutive interior angles. Let's make a note of that. Consecutive interior angles. Now, what do we know about consecutive interior angles? When we have parallel lines, they're supposed to be supplementary, add up to 180. And they told us that they add up to 180. Therefore, according to the consecutive interior angles converse, I do have parallel lines. Which ones are parallel? M and L. Those two that look parallel in my picture. M parallel with L. Now, if you look at the very next one, I use the same angles, but this time I said they're congruent. Are consecutive interior angles supposed to be congruent when we have parallel lines? Well, no. This one's obtuse, this one's acute. It doesn't make sense to say they're congruent. So this one does not determine anything. So, which lines are parallel? The answer for this one is none, because they're not supposed to be congruent when the lines are parallel. Okay, I'm going to do the next few a little quicker. Let's see how you do with them. Angles 1 and 9. Where are they? 1 and 9. Corresponding angles. Can you tell without covering it up? Cover it up. These are the two lines that we're looking at here. This line and this line. Those are corresponding angles. Corresponding angles are supposed to be congruent. So by the corresponding angles converse, we have parallel lines. Which ones? N and Q. So I'm going to say N is parallel with Q. How about angle 1 and angle 9 adding up to 180? Well, angle 1 and angle 9 are those corresponding angles. They're not supposed to add up to 180. They're supposed to be congruent. So adding up to 180 doesn't help us. Nothing can possibly be said about parallel lines if they add up to 180. Finally, angle 13 is congruent to angle 2. Where are those angles? Angle 13 is here, and angle 2 is here. Again, I'm going to cover up that part of the picture because I don't need it. I see this line and this line again that are left over. 13 and 2 are alternate exterior angles. So by the alternate exterior angles converse, I can say again that N is parallel with Q. Where's N and Q? Those two lines that we had left in the picture when I covered up this line, because 13 and 2 are only involved in this side of the picture. Let's look at some different examples. Solve for x. State the reason, the postulate or theorem that we use. Look at these two angles. Where are they? Inside the parallel lines. I can say parallel because that's indicated here. Parallel. So if these lines are parallel and I have, what are these called? That's right, consecutive interior angles. So because they're parallel, by the consecutive interior angles theorem, because I used parallel first, so by the consecutive interior angles theorem, these two angles have to be supplementary. That means add up to 180. So I can say 3x plus 120 equals 180. And then I can solve that equation. So let's do it. Minus 120 and 3x equals 60. divide by 3, and x equals 20. Not so bad, right? I have one more for you. Find the value of x, that's our goal, that makes line A parallel with line B. State the reason, postulate or theorem. So this time, let's look at these angles. This angle here and this angle here. What's true about these? They are alternate exterior angles. The alternate exterior angles theorem tells us that when the lines are parallel, these angles have to be what? That's right, congruent. Well, they didn't tell me the lines are parallel. I'm making the lines parallel. So I have to make these congruent. What does congruent mean? The same. So 2x minus 120 must equal x. And we can solve from there. I like to get my x's together first. So maybe minus 2x on both sides. And then negative 120 equals negative x. Divide by negative 1. And 120 equals x. But I prefer to write x equals 120. And you've done it. Finally, two things for you to do to summarize. First, compare and contrast the relationship between the measurement of the consecutive interior angles versus the other special angle pairs. Do you remember what was special about the consecutive interior angles versus the other ones? Second, list some places outside of the math classroom where you see parallel lines. Think about it and write down at least 2 different places where you see them. Be specific. For example, in the math classroom, I have a wall, and on the wall there are bricks, and the bricks have parallel lines as the sides of the bricks. You use your own example though. Thanks for watching.